Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this last day of February 2023. Dr. Margaret Nyakango, the Control of Budget, is here. And of course, we're looking at the latest in the counties. And there's a pattern that remains consistent, especially when you have to look at pending bills remain high. If you're talking about how the payrolls are being managed, I've seen your reports consistently. You talk about manual payrolls remain such significant in the counties. But from the latest review, what did you say are the key highlights that are of concern?
Thank you very much, Sam. Indeed, from the latest reports, that is as from the report as of the end of December 2022, the challenges still remain very much the same. And if you'll allow me, I'll just run through them. The key one is underperformance in revenues. This remains a major source of pending bills. You may not know that the two are very closely related. Because if we underperform in revenues, then it means we make commitments for money that is not available. When it comes to the end of the financial period, we cannot pay. So we end with the pending bills. So other than that, and closely related, is the high level of pending bills. Yeah, just to say that whatever we had in the books from June of 2022, that is the end of the last financial year, remains largely unsettled. And so if you looked at our figures, you'll find that the figures have remained the same. And it can only get worse because we continue to incur more expenses.
Right.
Then we observed a lot of delays in disbursements from the National Treasury of the equitable share. And I'm sure you must have seen the counties, the governors have been complaining. They do not get the money in the first place. As you know, my office is concerned with the release for spending. But in the first place, if the funds have not been released to the counties, then they are unable to even ask for it to spend. So that remains still a big problem. Cash flows have not been forthcoming. Then one other key issue that we noticed as of December is failure by fund administrators to submit quarterly financial statements to my office. As you know, counties have established a number of funds, and these funds operate kind of like state corporations in the national government. But the law says, the PFM says that they are supposed to prepare fund financial statements at the end of every quarter. And our analysis reveals that a good number of them had no financial statements, which is quite an area of concern because it means funds have been utilized without proper accountability. So generally, those are the issues, the key issues. There are, of course, many other small ones.
And when you say that the fund managers are not reporting, does that then mean that your reports are not representative of the actual reality on the ground?
It is implied. Let me explain. In the national government, we have state corporations and sagas. They work under the ministry, respective ministries. In the same way, the funds operate under the counties, almost like state corporations. Now, if you report for the MDA, that is the ministry, without including the reports from the state corporations, definitely you'll be leaving out a substantial portion of the spending. So when they do not prepare these financial statements, number one, they break the law. Number two, they then underreport because we do not capture all the spending that has taken place.
Right.
Yes.
And when I look at the ONSUS revenue reports, I think last time it was still way lower because at that time they had collected about 6 billion shillings. That is as of September 2022. Now I'm seeing that has risen to 13.1 billion shillings, but in terms of percentages, it's quite low, 22.5% in totality.
Yes.
You'd have expected, because it's half year, maybe you'd have expected to have 50%. So what is the bigger problem? Because some governors have come here and told us that we are trying to automate, especially those that are coming in for their first time after the transition. But this narrative of automation has gone on for so long. What is the actual challenge why they are not able to achieve these revenue targets?
I think the issue is contributed by a large number of reasons, and I could touch a few of them. One of the reasons that the revenue is low is that the counties have not quite captured all their sources of revenue. So I would say then under collection is quite an issue. But for whatever is collected, then we look at issues of recording and accountability. We have come across, and if you went through the report as of December 2022, we came across instances where the counties are spending at source. That means that they collect and they spend without, first of all, receiving the funds in the county revenue fund and then seeking authority to spend. You might ask, how do we find out? When we capture all the spending, we compare with the IFMIS records. And if we find that the expenditure that is recorded from the county is higher than what is reported in the IFMIS, then we know that the county has been spending at source. So there is then a lot of that poor practice of spending the revenue. And now we are not able to establish the actual totals of what was collected. So that means that the systems are not good, both in terms of recording and in terms of accounting. Then we also see instances where there is poor, I would call it resolving disputes in terms of revenues. You will find where, say, those who are supposed to pay the revenue feel that they have been overcharged, and then they need a way of resolving this. But we also found out that the ways of resolving conflicts has been poor. And that's why, from my office, we are now overseeing a best practice system that we are marketing to the counties called the TADAT, which has been formulated by the IMF. And this system looks holistically at how on-source revenues can be managed. From the point of forming the register, how to manage the risks, how to account for it, and how finally it can be accounted for at the end of the day. And this holistic system, I must say, will save us out of this. So to answer the question you said, why has this problem persisted? What it means is that even if you automate, that would be a form of sub-optimization, because you'd only be just handling one aspect, that is the collection. You will not have handled the accounting, you've not have handled the risk management and all the other aspects that go with on-source revenues.
And is there anything that makes a case for spending at source? Because sometimes they say that once you deposit with the Central Bank of Kenya, it introduces another layer of bureaucracy, yet there are certain needs that you need to spend on at a time that the exchequer releases are also late. Yet you need to pay salaries, you need to pay for other services.
Sam, that is a total misunderstanding, because once the funds are in the county revenue fund, they are accessible. It doesn't take time, and I can prove that to you. Now, when we talk of the law, what does the law say? That is the Public Finance Management Act. It says all the revenues must first be received and then spent. So I do not think there is a case for spending at source. This money is always available.
So for instance, if a county, let's take a case of Nairobi County, is receiving money through X commercial bank, and they receive that money, so they're then supposed to deposit it with who? Where's the fund account? CRF?
All the CRFs, some are held with the Central Bank of Kenya. Even the operational accounts are supposed to be with the Central Bank of Kenya, unless there is a reason why they should be held in a commercial bank. Okay. In which case, the county must seek approval of the National Treasury to open accounts in a commercial bank. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Senator Sigei, your thoughts about this, and especially on that question of on-source revenue, because the governors we've spoken to before, they have told of certain challenges that would necessitate them to spend at source.
Thank you, Sam, and I must appreciate the comments and the insights that the Dr. has given us in terms of the report, or rather the status as of December. I have keenly listened to her, and one of the very key one is what you've just asked, the inability by the county governments to maximize collection of revenue at the source. That is revenue under performance, which I'm sure is normally the greatest contributor to pending bills, because this is a commitment they do in the budget. And I think we've discussed this before. And what would happen generally is you have committed this in the budget. You do not go out of your way to collect this money. And therefore, in terms of now utilization of the funds that you receive, you prioritize, of course, those of your interest. Leave out the ones which ordinarily should have been funded. And that is the biggest challenge. And that, I felt, is a very key component of this conversation when it comes to now the status of the county governments. Now, collection and utilization of the funds at source is actually not provided for in law. She's well put it. It is expected that whether you are collecting it through an automated system or whichever that means, you must first of all then place it in the relevant CBK account for you now to spend it within law.
Right.
And the case of spending at source is a very lazy explanation. If it is about one saying, I have demands, and the process of accessing this money once it's in the account is long. It's a very lazy argument that is flying flat on the law. If we were to comply with the law, the money is collected, whether through an automatic system or otherwise, put that money so that in itself you are first of all complying with what the law says. And it is for good reason. You are expected to account for this money. You are expected to also ensure that you manage the risks which are attendant to collection and utilization of the funds at source. And so it cannot be argued that one of the reasons why then these county governments are unable to account for is because of the demands they have. Because remember, an entity, just like any other family, a government is an institution. You really cannot spend that which you don't have. So you probably cannot budget for spending when you do not know that I'll get it tomorrow. Right. So collect it, put it in the relevant collection account, follow the processes for expenditure, then you will be able to account for that money. And that is why in most cases you find now the reports that would come from the Office of the Auditor General speaks directly to these issues. The other day, we had the governor of Bomet County being asked to go back and avail documentations for expenses and queries that had been raised, not because of anything, but because of a number of these issues, including spending from the source.
Right.
I remember one of the questions and one of the issues which actually came out clearly was a procured system for automation of revenue collection, whose cost and maintenance and the value it has brought in terms of has it enhanced the collection of this revenue was in question, and documentations were not made available. He was asked to go back and avail those documentation. So if we were to comply with the law, it's the bare minimum that we can expect them to do. Okay. It will be very easy to push yourself. Greater percentage of collection goes into compliance with the regulations on how to spend. And I'm very sure we wouldn't be having as much questions as we are. Okay. But then again, given to them, one of the things that I would also, of course, raise again with the Office of the Controller of Budget is they've said there's delay in disbursement, which is okay. And my colleague here is the chairman of the relevant committee, which I'm sure they have had a discussion on this one. The other day, governors are complaining that we haven't received funds. But you've heard from the Controller of Budget. Mm-hmm. National government hasn't released these funds. Where there are delays in disbursements, what do we do? It is then not a justification to spend their own source revenue without following the due process, even if there are such delays. But given that they could be, they are there.
Okay, all right, and I'll get back to Dr. Nyakango after this. But Senator Osotsi, we've seen you hosted actually, and some governors that we've seen appearing before the Senate committee. And this question of pending bills, it's contested by almost all the governors. We've had even Governor Sakaja saying that that figure is not accurate. It needs to be looked at. They carry the burden of about 100 billion shillings out of 158 billion shillings. Governor Iguru was here recently, and she said as much, that what was being posted by the reports of the Control of Budget were not accurate. She was saying that she was contesting that the pending bills could be almost 800 million shillings. What are the concerns are you hearing from governors, and what path do we follow now so that to ensure that whatever pending bills are declared are the actual pending bills?
Well, the committee I chair of the public investments and special funds, we had a very candid engagement with the Control of Budget on Article 207. Which gives the Control of Budget some role in terms of management of the CRF, receiving requisitions and approving those requisitions, and also the process of managing the funds, as she stated. Mm-hmm. We were very happy that the Control of Budget shared with us a lot on the challenges that she is facing. One of the challenges is that the process of managing requisitions from counties and approving the requisition, the whole process is manual. There is need to automate that process so that a lot of malpractices which are being encountered in the process are as a result of lack of automation. And one of the things we noted was that sometimes you have multiple requisition over the same thing, and they end up being paid. You know what that means. That means corruption, that means inefficiency. So I think as a committee of the Senate, we will be making some proposals to Senate, either through a motion on the need to fast-track the automation of processes in the Office of the Controller of Budget. The issue of pending bills is a serious issue. It's a serious issue because we know the people who provided services, the contractors, are really suffering. Some of them, it's not their making. They have done the job, they have spent their money, some have taken loans in the bank, but they're not being paid. You see, it is very wrong for some governors to accuse the Office of the Controller of Budget of giving wrong figures. We know the Controller of Budget receives budgets from the counties. The Controller of Budget has officers in every county who are involved in these processes, even within the counties where they are stationed. So really, when you come and say the figures are not right, so what are the right figures? So we have a problem there. And I think the issue of pending bills needs to be given some emphasis by the county government, because we cannot continue having pending bills. When the law is very clear that the first charge is the pending bills, paying your debts.
Right.
So I think we are concerned as a Senate on the issue of pending bills, which is affecting many other processes. Yes, the control of budget has said the initial problem is underperformance of revenue. Underperformance of revenue results from budgeting challenges. If you don't budget well, you will have underperformance in revenue. So this is a matter that needs to be looked at very seriously, the issue of budget in the counties. Are those budgets realistic? Are those targets realistic or not? I think that should be the starting point. So the process of budgeting within the counties must be improved so that when they plan, for example, to raise this amount of money, let them meet the target or be close to the target, because the variance in some counties is so huge that you wonder whether there is need to do budgeting in the first place. There are issues about disbursement of funds. This is a real problem, and it really affects the planning in counties, because if you don't release funds in time, and counties have planned to undertake some projects, they will not be able to undertake the projects in time. Then at the end of the year, when the money comes, because now the national government, when it realizes they're going to the end of the year, they now struggle to get all that money to the counties. There is no time. Okay. So really, this is really affecting planning, it's really affecting progress and work in counties. Okay. So I think it's important for the national government. We know there are challenges about collection of taxes and all that, but I think we need to have an efficient process so that counties are able to receive money in time, so they don't blame anyone else. But all said and done, counties were designed to be economic units. They were not designed to be units which would be waiting for money from the national government all the time. They were supposed to generate their own internal revenue through on-source revenue. But that seems not to be working. And I think we have discussed this issue within Senate to see how we can deal with the issue of on-source revenue. Some revenue is spent at source, which it is not a challenge. To me, it's unlawful. It is against the PFM Act to spend money at source. So if counties were well organized, they had automated system, they had proper processes in place, we would not have a problem with the on-source revenue. Okay. And they will generate enough money to do some of the basic things they can do as they wait for disbursement from the national government. So I think we are now about 10 years of devolution. There are challenges. And I think it's time now to have a reflection on devolution generally. What's working, what's not working. So that Senate, as per its role under Article 96(1), which is to protect counties, can perform its role through legislation or through coming up with regulations and all those things to seal the loopholes. One of the other loopholes which exist in the whole process is IFMIS. It is important to have this system integrated, an end-to-end integrated system. We cannot run two-payment system. One part of it is automated, one part of it is manual. Okay. We'll get into problems.
Controller, explain this to me, because if you go to the CBD and you pay for parking, that money is being collected through a certain system. Yes. If you go somewhere else, there's some money that is also being collected, whether it's at a local hospital or whatever. So that money, which is being collected by an agency, how does it find its way to the county revenue fund?
Thank you, Sam. It is supposed to find its way to the county revenue fund. As to whether it actually does is a question for another day. That is precisely what we are grappling with. For instance, we did find that the Nairobi City County has numerous bank accounts which can receive revenue.
With the central bank or with commercial banks?
With commercial banks. Yes, with commercial banks. Some are with the central bank. A good example will be the collections on liquor licensing. That one operates its own account, so that one never gets to the CRF. And it is one of the highest paying sources of revenue. But it never gets to the CRF.
And is it ever captured somewhere? The figures?
It is, I think it's a long story we may not discuss here. Let's just say that the systems are not good. I can tell you, for instance, that as at the end of December, please look at Nairobi County for revenues, and you will be shocked. Just go to your schedule, and you will see it's alphabetic. So you will see,
yes,
should be able to see Nairobi.
14.6%.
Yeah.
2.6 billion.
Yes. So if Nairobi collects 2.6 for half year, what we expect for the full year is just about 5 billion.
Against a target of 18?
Absolutely. So it doesn't make even 30%. And there is expenditure that has been committed based on the 18 billion. And we do believe that Nairobi can collect a lot more than the 18 billion. But ask yourself where it goes. It is collected, but as to where it goes is anyone's guess. Yeah.
And that is interesting, because listening to the governor yesterday, he was talking about they feel the pending bills of 100 billion shillings is not what they should be paying. And you've had the submissions here. Because every other time a new governor comes in and says, we are going to audit all the pending bills. So there are those that are cleared for payment. There are those that are not. But Governor Iguru was saying that eventually those that had been rejected find their own way back to what is being considered, and therefore keeps pushing up the pending bills. 100 billion shillings of pending bills. If you look at the allocation from the equitable share, it's about, is it 19 or 20 billion shillings for Nairobi County?
Yes.
Surely there's no way they're going to make to pay for this.
Yeah.
What are the suggestions?
It is not an answer I can give you, because we need to go back to how the bills got there in the first place. And I believe that's the job of the new governor right now. There is something that Senator Ososi mentioned, and this is the issue of substituting those who get paid. We have this system where the county would prepare a schedule and bring it to my office and tell me these are the suppliers who would like to pay. But unfortunately, they never get to pay those particular suppliers. Instead, once the money is in the county revenue fund, they pay other people completely different from what they had requisitioned. And this is why we were explaining that if this system was automated, it could capture those that were requisitioned for payment and not have this other substitution. Part of the reason you have seen a war of words in the press is because I requested that I be allowed to look at the bank statements. And this, of course, then created a lot of, what would I call it? Because I need to be politically correct.
Back and forth exchange or
yes,
something?
Yes, it's an exchange, and a bad one at that. because the counties would not like me to see what they do in the bank statements, because there are a lot of ongoings there. But if we are going to cure this problem, we must automate the processes so that once a supplier is on the requisition schedule, it ensures that that particular supplier is actually paid. Because if we don't do that, we are going to end up with older and older bills just staying on the list, while newer and newer bills are being paid by the counties.
Okay, I'll get back to the question of Council of Governors, but
maybe before you go there, just to comment on what she has said.
Go ahead.
On the issue of access to financial statement, I think this is one issue that we are taking very seriously as a committee, because she told us that she has received threats from the Council of Governors on a request to access some of the financial records. And we are saying, if the control of budget has powers to approve expenditure, then she should also have powers to see what has been spent on. Because what is happening in some counties is that they submit a request indicating that they want to spend X amount of money for so and so, but they end up substituting with someone else. So that is one of the reasons why we have pending bills.
Some of them argue that that's the work of the Auditor General.
No, but even if it's the work of the Auditor General, I think whoever approves payment must also see what he has approved.
Okay.
What has it done?
I'll come back for clarity, but yes, Senator.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. for that expose. When you look at the role of the Comptroller of Budget, you know, it is a constitutional body. Remember, it was a split from the OAG, right? And now its mandate is provided for. One of which, other than reporting, other than managing that budget for the national and the county government, it also has got a role to investigate under, I think, Article 252(1) of the Constitution.
Yes.
Investigation, some includes giving a report as to what is it that they have approved as the Comptroller of Budget in the allocation of funds and how that money has been used. And it's very sad to hear that a requisition is made of a payment of person XYZ, and the moment that is released, it doesn't get to that same person. And what we've heard out there, Sam, is that the quickest way to die is to do business with the county governments, or the quickest way to kill your business, especially when you're a startup, is to work for the county governments. And it's not because they don't have money. It is because of what we've just been told. There is very intentional non-compliance with the law in terms of compliance with the requisitions that have been made. When we are told that there are multiple requisitions, you can request 3-4 times for release of certain funds and not to now directly pay the people you've requested for. You also divert it now to pay your cronies. It is so sad because it's an avenue for pilferage of public resources to pay your own people, yet you've used other people's requisitions to make it. And when we talk about seeing the statements, I do not think it is beyond the mandate of the Office of the Comptroller of Budget. It is not. Because how else then will you report for what you have approved? How else will you monitor? Additional mandate is to also resolve disputes. How can you resolve disputes, for example, when you're saying there are delays in payments and you are not able to say, as to what I approved for release to you, as to what you put into your CRF if it ever gets there, as own revenue collection, how have you utilized it? So I think it is one of those things that Senator Osotsi and team, as a Senate, we will also push. Because what we are looking at is we didn't go to devolved government to avail money for certain people or to get certain individuals enrich themselves. That ought to have been availing resources to benefit that local person who is in the lowest cadre of business enterprise at the county level. As and when they do business, they get paid fairly. And so when we say it will be a very good idea if we automate this process of requisition, we will be hearing little of what they always say, my bill equal IB, because that's what they almost, you can be in the internet banking forever. You never get paid. You wonder why. And they say, you know what? Kama bill yako imefika IB, you will be sorted, you will be paid. But it never gets paid. Reason being what Dr. has just said. You requisition, you divert to suit, or rather to pay a specific person, not the one you've requested for.
Let's understand this, because we've seen the Council of Governors protesting against, was it a request or was it approval for you to access what? So explain to us, what is it that you wanted to be able to see to help you execute your mandate?
Okay, Sam, there are two approaches to verifying whether the proper payees get paid. One is for us to get the bank statements that show who actually got paid. And then, of course, that would mean my office getting back to the county and saying, your requisition said you are paying A, B, C, D, but we can see that you paid C, D, E, F. Yeah, so that's one approach. The second approach was the automation, in which case all the requisitions would be on a system, so that there is no manual intervention in terms of who gets paid. And the way we agreed with the central bank on this was to have requisitions in a batch. So when we do ABCD, we lock it as ABCD, and it is approved as ABCD. Now, in this particular one, all that my office needs to see is that the batch with ABCD has gone through. But that requires that we have access to the account where we can see that that batch has gone through. Then we would be handling them in batches. We lock the batch, and it goes as a batch. And the approver at the county level has no access to change what is on the batch. It is locked at source. And then central bank passes it, and we check that that batch has gone through. So both of these, as you can see, would require at least online access to what is happening in the account. But that is now they won't allow.
Okay.
Yes.
Because the argument is that that would be interfering with their institutional autonomy and sort of overstepping the mandate. No, that's what they have said.
That is what they have said, yes.
Yeah, so I don't know what your response is to that in terms of interfering with the institutional autonomy.
Okay. From where I sit, mine is an oversight institution. And when you have an oversight institution, that is not where you keep your secrets from. Look at how KRA works. I mean, KRA can enter into any system and see what is there. They do not do that for their own benefit. But we are there as oversight, a constitutional body, on behalf of the citizens.
Right.
We don't do it because we enjoy doing it, but we do it with an objective. And this objective is to ensure that if it is payments, they have gone to the right payees. If it is revenue, it goes to the right place. And it is all about transparency and accountability. And I think, Sam, this is also covered very well in the Constitution. It is not the making of the controller of budget that there must be transparency and accountability in the way that public finances are handled.
Okay.
Yes.
So how do you remedy that so that it's not a question of an altercation between the Council of Governors and the control of budget, but rather something that is founded in law? I know you're talking about a motion, but how better to make it that is not dependent on Dr. Nyakango or the Council of Governors chair of the time?
Well, I think Senator Sigei has alluded to that Article 252, 1A gives a constitutional, independent constitutional office and a commission the powers to conduct investigation on its own initiative or as a trigger by a complaint from the public. And I think that's an avenue the controller of budget can try and exhaust. And in fact, under the same article, the controller of budget has powers to summon witnesses to appear for the purpose of investigation. So for us, we have asked her to present to us that communication from the Council of Governors so that we can trigger a process within Senate, because Senate, under Article 96 of the Constitution, Article 96(1), it has powers to protect the interest of counties, and will be exercising those powers there. So the controller of budget has a constitutional mandate to do what she has requested to do. And I think there shouldn't be any contestation from the Council of Governors on this very straightforward matter, that if I am giving approval for you to spend, I should also have the right to see what you have spent on. I think that's very important.
And that is what I'm asking. Dr. Nyakango, do you understand my question I'm asking? Because, yes, it's a good cause. But then again, even as he says that you have the power to summon, you may need something to make it, it's not dependent on your goodwill or the goodwill of the governor of the time, but rather something that becomes now procedural. What do you need? Is it regulations? Is it an act? Is it an amendment? What is it?
Yes, I hear you. Indeed, we did draw up the COB regulations, and they were approved at the National Assembly, but annulled at the Senate level. So we are in the process of resubmitting. Within these regulations, we have outlined all those, what you are talking about. So we have outlined what it takes to monitor and evaluate budget implementation and all that goes with it. So there are regulations that are an offshoot of the Control of Budget Act. They operationalize every aspect of the Act. Yes, and that will now anchor all these processes in law.
Okay.
Yes.
Very interesting. And I was just looking at the law. I think it's Article 207 of the Constitution that talks about how resources are to be managed at the county level. And let me just get that out, which is about creation of a county revenue fund, which is the only place that resources shall come through. I'm just wondering, Honorable Senator Sigei, if you find that there are resources that are not necessarily being deposited to the county revenue fund, what course of action would be taken if there's no enabling legislation excluding such kind of revenues from going to that?
I would first of all some comment about the challenges to whether or not by the controller of budget asking to inspect the accounts of the county governments, they are encroaching on the mandate of another entity. When you look at its mandate, and from the explanation that we've just been given, you heard what the Council of Governors said, that you have no business examining the expenditure. But the issue is, I am the one who releases these funds to you. I am under an obligation to monitor. I am under an obligation to evaluate how you have utilized these resources. Monitoring basically means that it's not that the controller of budget will be saying, I want to examine from A to Z how this money has been done, how this money has been utilized in your account. And the explanation that she gave was so plain that, give me the requisition. I approve this requisition. Let me check whether that particular approval I made is what you've paid out. Simply put, that is what they are seeking for in the accounts. And as per the presentations that Dr. Nyakango previously made before the committee, and this the Senator will definitely take it up seriously, we want to facilitate the protection of public resources and putting them into good use. We can only do that by protecting the person who will help us as a Senate to ensure that devolution works, such that the law requires the county governments to put all its resources under CRF, for example.
Right.
Doing it otherwise is against the law. So the remedies you are asking is just compliance with the law as it were. It is black and white.
She just reported that, for instance, in Nairobi, the liquor licensing fees are not being deposited. And it's been across many years. So what next? If the county assembly is not oversighting and making sure that is done, the Senate has not been in a position to intervene and make sure that that is done, what then?
Yes. Hear what he said. It is a long story. It is a perpetuation by the governors or the leadership of the county governments of an illegality. To that extent, the best that the Senate can do is to also push to ensure that those governors who are not complying are brought to book, are exposed. And of course, as we always say, we really, really need to encourage our dear brothers and sisters in leadership to look at what the law says, do that which is right, serve the people of Kenya, because that is the mandate they have been given. Because it doesn't make sense to have a law asking you, you can only open an account with the approval of the controller of budget in a commercial bank, and any other account should be in the central bank. It is not rocket science to seek for that approval, because I know if there would be a denial, there must be a reason. Otherwise, there would be no denial to facilitate the operations of any county government's financial obligations by the controller of budget. Remember, we are serving the same people, Sam.
Right.
The same people who are being served by the county government of Nairobi is the same population that is served by another county government, because they are all Kenyans. And the only issue is, and we would always say, if the law says so, why can't you comply? And we've had this conversation before. We have legislated in almost every sector. The challenge that we have is the impediment on compliance. And it is a decision that any person who is in leadership at that given time just opts not to do it. Because if it's provided for in law, and you know, I have 2.9 billion out of legal licensing, why not channel that money to the relevant account? It is your money at the end of the day.
Okay.
So it's just a feel that we just have to do it also as a Senate, become a little bit stricter, call them to book, shame them, so that they comply with the law, because it is there. Yes. The regulations which Dr. Nyagango here made reference to has already been, I think this was a discussion that they had in the last session with the committee, chaired by my colleague, that's the Public Investments and Special Funds Committee, which the Senate is very keen on ensuring that that is done, closed on it, so that we make it now easier and available for people to comply with it.
Okay. All right. And Dr. I'll come to you, Senator Sotsi. But Dr. I look at the expenditure reports. If you look at the totality of the counties, 40% of recurrent expenditure has been met by half year. So the target would be 50%. So
yes,
quite in order. But if you look at the development expenditure, it's just about 6.9% in the half year.
Yes. And
the target should be 100%. So again, for the half year should have been 50%. And the explanation has been that the exchequer releases are late. The early explanation for the first quarter was that we are just coming in, we're establishing the administration. And so there's not so much going on in terms of development. The resources are not in. What from your experience is the real cause? Do you always have a slow absorption of development expenditure or budgets in the first half of the year?
Yes, this has been happening, but during transition years, it's usually been worse than the other years. And what usually happens, yes, what you have mentioned, that the new leaders are still grappling with what is in their dockets, but also that they want to rearrange in line with their manifestos, because the governors would be having different priorities from their predecessors. However, where you have the same governor who has been there and they are still ongoing, so right, we do not understand why they really should not spend. But let me give my own view of this. When funds are scarce and a county receives say the equitable share for a certain month, they actually get a warning from the Treasury to prioritize salaries so that people do not go on strike. We have not a blog, but a WhatsApp wall where whenever the funds are released, the Accountant General asks the counties to prioritize salaries and not development. So the fact that the cash flow is poor in terms of disbursements means that the counties will prioritize recurrent expenditures as opposed to development. Do not forget the kitty is the same. So currently, also there was a problem, a delay in conditional grants. And that is a major contributor of low development. Usually, counties receive conditional grants for certain dedicated development projects. And these funds have only just been released in January. So I'm expecting that the third quarter reports on development will be slightly improved.
Okay.
Yes, because the counties have been drawing those conditional grants.
And that's interesting. If the Accountant General can give the warning, I'm presuming he's doing that out of an sort of advisory.
Yes.
But so this may remain the situation as long as we have revenue challenges at the national level.
Yes.
So then why are we planning for development if we can't meet the cost?
Well, Sam, the budgets are very noble, but don't forget that budgets are prepared against certain underlying assumptions. So you anticipate, in fact, you will say that the achievement of these objectives is contingent upon receiving the relevant cash flows at the right time. That is very, very important for us to note. So if those funds have not been received on time, right now I know no one has received the funds for December, for January, and now February, because by 15th of February, the counties are supposed to have received their funds. So we are talking 3 months behind. I think it would be expecting miracles if we expected the development plans to be on target as planned. Yes.
Senator Sotsi, how do you face this reality? Because we're almost done with the third quarter. It should end at the end of which month? Is it March?
March.
Yeah, so we are almost 70% in. So how do we rationalize this reality, knowing that the recurrent expenditure is almost static? It either goes up or stays there.
Well, I think this is a major challenge that requires all the stakeholders in the devolution process to sit down and think how to deal with this problem of late disbursement of funds. Because late disbursement of funds, as I said earlier, affects the planning. It also, it's very costly to counties, because I know some counties end up borrowing from commercial banks to be able to do some of these things like salaries and all that. And that comes at a cost, because they have to pay interest on the funds they are borrowed. So I think it requires a rethink on how to strengthen processes around on-source revenue. So that counties have capacity to generate enough local revenue, which they can utilize to run some of the processes. So I think it's a rethink. Senate is also thinking through how that can be done. But we understand the challenges of the national government, because they cannot disperse what they don't have. They have to collect money. And, you know, there are a lot of exchequer requirements, competing exchequer requirements. But I think we need to have a process, either a legal process in place, so that counties are given priority in terms of disbursement of funds, because of the effect it has on the economy. I wanted to say one thing on Article 207, 4, in terms of establishment and management of funds. The Control of Budget had alluded to the fact that most fund managers do not submit quarterly reports to our office. I think that's a very serious issue, and as the chair of the Special Fund, Public Investment and Special Fund Committee, we are looking into this matter, because I can tell you one of the easiest way of taking away money from the county is to establish a fund. Put money in it. You don't have an obligation to get money from CRF. You take it into a fund and take it away from there. So I think there is need to streamline the process of establishment and management of funds to ensure that public funds are not lost through these special funds.
Just requires the county assembly to pass?
Yeah, county assembly to pass, and that process must be strengthened. So that we don't have so many funds. I know that in some counties we have funds multiple funds which do the same thing. We have an enterprise fund, we have an empowerment fund, they are all doing the same thing. But you find that most of the monies that are sent to these funds are misappropriated. I think this is one thing that the Office of the Controller of Budget, working with us, we can see ways in which we can tighten it so that public money is not lost through some of these multiple funds which are created in the counties.
Senator Sige, I'll give the final word, but first, I just almost said Honorable Nyakango, Dr. Nyakango, if you're to reflect on, he says that, and actually one of the governors told us here that they have to take loans to be in a position to meet the immediate expenditure. Is there any process of approval that you require to do? Because on your reporting, you tell us that the county was expecting revenue from the equitable share, conditional grant, or on-source revenue. Never are we told about loans.
In terms of borrowing, you mean?
Yeah.
In terms of cash flow planning, counties are allowed short-term borrowing, very short-term. And here we are talking about the equitable share is delayed, and they need to pay salaries, so they'll have an arrangement. Normally there should be an arrangement with a local bank, which then pays the salaries. And once the equitable share comes in, they pay immediately. Indeed, the banks do not charge anything if the payment is made within 30 days. However, what has been happening is that the delays have become longer and longer. And that then means that the counties must now incur interest, which is unplanned for. So that hurts them even more in terms of cash flow. So there are laws. All this is in the PFM Act and the regulations. When we go through the regulations, you'll actually find the process of how the short-term financing can be done. No, everything is outlined in the PFM Act and regulations.
Yes. And finally, for you, for counties like Busia that have reported that they've never put up the official residences of some state officers there, and there are some counties that you visit and you see they never established proper headquarters, and this was something that was taken care of in the very first term of devolution. Do they still have space to do that? If yes, what do they need to do?
Yes, they may have, but they'll have to go through a longer process of approval. You will observe that these funds were available in those early stages, like we said. But they must have been used for something else. What it then means is that they must, first of all, deal with the CRA, the Commission for Revenue Allocation, to disclose the fact that they never put up those residences, and then seek permission now to include them in their budgets. They'll not just do it. It's not a walk in the park. There are a lot of approvals required, but bottom line, it's possible. Yeah, but it means there'll be an opportunity cost because something else has to suffer.
All right.
Yes.
Let's take a look at the feedback, then I'll allow Senator Sige to close for us. with his final remarks, not with a prayer. At Citizen TV, at Sam Gituku, the hashtag to use is daybreak. And Kenyans are saying, Remy Butia, Kenya has new rules for choosing the people who run its elections, making the selection process more participatory and reflective of the country's diversity. The task ahead is enhancing and supporting constitutional democracy in Kenya. This is based on our earlier conversation. The county bosses should eat a humble pie. Did you just say an humble pie? Okay. Control of budget, do its constitutional work, and correct the mess overspending in our counties. God bless. Bobo Tieno, yes, the control of budget should be allowed to access CBK to know how much money counties are given, as it will caution governors from overspending and curb cases of corruption we have been witnessing. Julius, you're saying that they fought Sakaja like hell. We already know the beneficiaries of these monies. Why are they untouchables? One day, hell will break loose, and it will never be merry for them anymore. That day is coming soon. Whoa, okay. Engineer Lazaro, governors should be held accountable for any financial misappropriation in their respective counties. Otherwise, this regime seems not committed to the growth of devolution. Very soon, devolution will be history. Whoa, all right. Paul Orodi, the amount of lip service we dish to money matters in this country is appalling. These parliamentarians are the... Okay. The Auditor General and Control of Budget have given so many recommendations. Whoa, did you just insult my panelist here in studio? You didn't do that. Senator Sige,
I don't think he meant Senator Sotsi and myself.
But you are legislators.
And two, he probably didn't understand the context also of all these conversations that we have had.
Okay.
But otherwise, I would say that it is true, we need to enhance accountability from our county governments. That is the only way we will protect devolution, we will protect service delivery to the people who actually are just sitting back waiting for the leadership in office to serve them and serve them very well. And I want to commit also to the control of budget that the Senate will also do everything it's within its power to support in order to ensure that we push where possible the national government to disburse funds in good time, and we also follow in terms of our oversight role to ensure that that resource which is released is put into good use to serve the people of Kenya and to improve their livelihoods.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Dr. Margaret Nyakango, the Control of Budget, for making time for us. Senator Godfrey Sotsi and Senator Wakili Hilary Sigei for joining us to have this conversation. We'll continue to do this to spotlight on what's going on in the counties, the concerns, the challenges, and of course, looking for solutions. My name is Sam Gituku. Bye for now. See you some other time.